the 114th birthday celebration for the late great Buckle Neal. Before we begin the formal aspect of our very brief program, I wanted to direct your attention to the video screen for a short reflection of the life of the late great Buckle Neal, who we are celebrating and will continue to celebrate. In the words of record Congressman Emanuel Cleaver II, as long as we remember Buck, he will live forever. So please direct your attention to the screen for this short piece on my dear friend, the legendary Buckle Neal.
People say to me, well, you guys were too short. I think I'd rather die. I wouldn't play anything. I would cheat down.
So as many of you know the story, he was up for induction into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 2006. And to be honest, we all thought it was a shoo-in that Buck was going to get in the Hall of Fame. In actuality, the Hall of Fame put the process together for Buck to get in. And it was February 27, 2006. I remember this day and wait for me as long as my brother would say I'm about that for mine. And Buck and I left home that morning with suitcases packed with airline tickets that the Hall of Fame had purchased for us. That's how sure we were that Buck was going to get in. This is just a mere formality. And so the Hall of Fame had put together a committee of 12 Negro League historians, researchers, and educators, and they had gathered down in Tampa, Florida, where they were going to make a decision on a list of about 35 Negro League players who had made the final ballot. Buckle Neal and the late great Minnie Minoso were the only two living names on that list. So Buck and I leave home that morning with suitcases packed with airline tickets that the Hall of Fame had purchased for us. And so once the announcement was made, we're going to fly down to Tampa, where Buck was going to participate in a press conference that very next day. So at that time, y'all, I was the marketing director for the museum. And so I had brokered a deal with our partner Sprint, now of course T-Mobile. And so I've got my Sprint phone. Buck has his Sprint phone. And we're going to take the Hall of Fame call on the Sprint phone. And then Sprint Glory was going to pay us a bunch of money to help build the Buckle Neal Education and Research Center. Absolutely brilliant, if I have to say so myself. And so the call was supposed to come to me that morning at about 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock rolls around, y'all, and I don't get a phone call. About noon, my former colleague, Dr. Ray Dodger, who was the museum's curator at that time, he was one of the members down at Tampa who was part of the selection process. He called me and he said, Mom, this thing is looking tight. We just did strong vote, and Buck is coming up one vote shy. Former Commissioner Faye Vincent, late great Faye Vincent, was overseeing the committee, but he did not have a vote. And as Ray would say, he's reconvened us so that we can go back and talk about Buck and the late great Minnie Minoso, the only two people still alive on the entire list. Well, my good friend, the great writer Joe Posnanski, was in the conference room with Buck. And I called him out and I said, hey Joe, I just got a message from Ray, and he says Buck is one vote shy, they just going in and going to talk about this again. He's in disbelief. Well, finally about 2 o'clock, I get a call from Jeff Iverson. Jeff Iverson at that time was the marketing director for the National Baseball Hall of Fame. He has since retired as the president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And y'all, Jeff calls me and he says, Bob, Buck didn't get enough votes. And y'all, I felt like someone had kicked me in my gut. Because now I've got to go back in this conference room and tell my friend that he didn't get enough votes when I know in his heart he thought he was in. Why wouldn't he? So I go in, I excuse a few folks. Buck is seated at the head of the table in our little conference room. Joe Kostanski was on this side. I go to the opposite side, and I am literally trying to collect myself. I don't know how I'm going to tell him. And so finally, I look up at Buck, and I say, well, Buck, we didn't get enough votes. And he looks at me, and he smiles. He said, well, that's how the cookie crumbles. And in the next voice, he asked me how many had gotten in. I said, 17. He hits the table in utter jubilation. He was excited that 17 of his colleagues had got their rightful place in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, on the other hand, not so much. I was furious because in my mind, you can't put 17 in and leave Buck out when there was no limitation on the number of people that could go in. Now, in retrospect, I should have carried the same spirit that Buck did, because to put 17 in one fell swoop was monumental. But Dr. D, my guy did it, and I wasn't feeling it. And so he asked me who they were. And I didn't know at that time, and the next word that came out of his mouth, I wonder if the Hall of Fame will invite me to speak. Now, Joe Kostanski was beat red. He was furious. He looks at Buck. He said, Buck, you wouldn't do that, would you? Buck says, Joe, of course I would. What has my life been like? I said, well, Buck, I need to go downstairs. For those of you who have been to the museum, you know where the Field of Legends is there at the Dignified Baseball Museum. I think it's one of the most amazing displays in any museum anywhere in the world. I said, Buck, I need to go downstairs. I need to go deliver views, and then I'll come and get you. We had over 300 people who had gathered there for what we all thought was going to be a Hall of Fame celebration announcement. I'll come back and get you so you can address the group, and then we'll let everybody go home. It's been a long day. Well, as I so oftentimes tell the story, from our upstairs conference room down to the Field of Legends, that was the longest walk of my life. I was literally trying to coach myself. Bob, you can't cry. This is your job. You've got to suck it up. You can't cry. The more I was telling myself not to cry, tears were steadily building in my eyes, and we had the podium at second base. And this is the honest to God's truth. I have yet to go back to watch that video. I have no idea what I said that day, but whatever it was, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. People were openly emotional. And this wasn't now just disappointment. Oh no, this was pain. This was outrage. How dare they do this to our Bumblebee? Well, Buck walks in through the gift shop, and of course the room erupts into this thunderous ovation. And for lack of a better term, he walks over to the podium and he delivers one of the most amazing concession speeches that I've ever heard. What he did that day was he implored all of us not to be angry, not to be bitter, not to express any ill will toward anyone who may have had something to do with this decision. As he would go on to say, I had an opportunity. And in this great country, Bob, that's all you can ever ask. They didn't think old Buck was good enough. Well, we've got to deal with that. But if I'm a Hall of Famer in your eyes, that's all that matters to me. Just keep on loving old Buck. Now, I'm over in the corner now, y'all. I'm a complete wreck. Tears are flowing down my face. But as I tell my guests, in particular the student audience that we entertained there at the Dignified Baseball Museum, what he did that day was he literally reached out his arms and wrapped them around all of us and said, it's okay. Instead of us consoling him, he was consoling us. And what I still say to this day, to be be one of the most amazing displays of strength of character that I've ever witnessed. He would go to Cooperstown, deliver this impassioned speech on behalf of 17 dead folks who did not have a voice. He became their voice. And what I also say to be one of the most selfless acts in American sports history, a little over 2 months later, my dear friend Buckle Mill passed away himself at age 94, a month shy of his 95th birthday. But what he taught us that day was a tremendously valuable lesson on how to handle disappointment. Yeah, because he handled it so graciously, everybody thought he wasn't disappointed. But of course he was. The Hall of Fame represents the pinnacle in any athlete's career. And so yes, he wanted to be there, but it was never going to be so sullen that he couldn't genuinely express joy for those who had gotten it. And so 16 years after his passing, he finally crosses over that threshold into baseball immortality. And to be honest, y'all, for those 16 years, I was pretty salty. I tell people all the time, I'm trying to be more Buck-like, but I ain't there yet. You know, it's still a work in progress. Yeah, it's a work in progress. And everything that we do at Buck's Museum is done with his spirit and his legacy in mind. And of course, when he went to Cooperstown and delivered that speech, and it took me a little while to reconcile with this, that was his Hall of Fame speech. Because he never would have talked about himself. He would have talked about what they did, how they built that bridge across the chasm of prejudice that allowed others to cross over that bridge. And so you see what we do every day, folks, at the Dignified Baseball Museum is what Buck wanted us to do. And that is to celebrate the bridge builders. You see, it's rare in our society that we celebrate the people who built the bridge. We celebrate the people who crossed over the bridge. And Buck wanted us to celebrate the bridge builders, and that is what we do every single day in the memory of the late, great Buck O'Neil. So that's basically what the video is going to say. I'm the president of the Dignified Baseball Museum, and I am so thankful for all of you for coming out to help us celebrate Buck. And I got a few housekeeping things. I want to introduce members of our board of directors, our former chairperson of the board, Ms. Betty Brown, is with us. And Randolph, who you'll be hearing a little bit more from here in just a few minutes. And I want to tell my friends over at Heartland, you guys have heard me say this on many occasions. The relationship that we've had with Heartland is now over 2 decades long. And it is rare that you can maintain a partnership of that level for that long. And Heartland has been here with this museum every single step of the way. And I say this not just because they're here tonight. This museum would not be where it is today without the generosity of our friends at Heartland and the generosity of all of you here in this room. I've got some members of our state legislature that I want to recognize. So please stand and call the name if you recognize. Representative Mark Sharp is here with us tonight. Mark, thank you so much for your continued advocacy of the Representative Donald Barnes is here tonight. Donald, please stand and be recognized. Representative Melissa Douglas, where are you, Melissa? Thank you. Representative Michael Johnson, I think is here. I haven't seen him yet, but Michael is supposed to be here. And Michael is always going to stalwart and having to push the museum here in those halls down in Jefferson City. And Representative Anthony Ely also is supposed to be here. I don't know if he's made it in yet. Some of you may know we announced at the Hall of Fame that they were still able to generate $1.35 million in support of the Dignified Baseball Museum. Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and it is with my pleasure to introduce to you the District Story Director from ID and a dear friend of this museum, Mr. Chris Wilfong.
Videos are pretty good most of the time. But I have a video that I have Bob. We're going to talk about. I'm here on behalf of ID. I want to thank everyone of you in the audience for allowing us to be here. It's been a pleasure to be one of the contributing sponsors and folks that help support the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. I got this here today and I had a speech and I forgot it. And then I had to follow that, right? I was a young kid. I grew up in Kansas City. I don't know if you guys can come here and hear me, but I grew up in Kansas City and I went to a ball game in Royals. Like, really reminded, maybe you're still out of church out there. And Buck O'Neill was sitting out there. And he was one of those fellas you could just go up to as a young man and say, hey, you know, I thought he was just a ball player, just some guy that had retired, had some seat and all the things. And he was super nice, big smiles. I think he had to hide anything before he had a whole smile. I go over and he's a ball player, and I asked about it, and my dad was telling the stories. Well, I joined IB later on in my life, and I get involved and we do the things, and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum comes forward, and Heidi jumps on, and then I got to really learn who Buck was, and I got to hear about the stories, I got to hear about the lessons that me as a young kiddo growing up watching Bo Jackson and Dwight Good and all the other fellas that were playing ball. It was just a ball player to me. But that's the story. So I think tonight, happy birthday, Buck. I appreciate all of you guys coming out and helping us support the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And I'm super proud to be a part of it. Bob, thank you so much. And let's have a good evening.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, ID, for your continued support. I think some of you, as part of your gift tonight, have the ID bobblehead that we did for his Hall of Fame. So what a perfect memento. His birthday would have been Thursday, November 13th. And as I tell you, no one loved a good party the way that Buck did. And when he walked in the room lit up. And I see all the ladies who got the assignment and wore their red tonight because y'all knew that Buck liked that red. He loved that woman in the red dress. Or as he told my buddy Joe Constantine, he said, son, one thing in this life, you never walk by a red dress. And so we're thrilled that you guys are here. It is now my esteemed honor on behalf of the staff, and let me recognize them formally because our team does an amazing job. Y'all please give it up for the staff of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. I ain't running nothing. No, they do all the real work and the heavy lifting there, and without them, this museum would not function the way that it does. And so on behalf of our team at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, on behalf of our board of directors of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, it is my esteemed honor to present the Buck O'Neill Heart of a Champion Award. And this award is given every year to someone who embodies the spirit of Buck, but who also supports Buck's music. And our honoree this year for 2025. She hasn't been that long on our board, but she's been supporting the museum well before she came on board. She is the CEO and president of the Heartland Black Chamber of Commerce. Y'all, please put your hands together for the 2025 Buck O'Neill Heart of the Chamber of
I'm giving y'all heads up, all pastors will have a seat. Wow. I'm lost for words. When Harlem Black Chamber, we support the museum, but I've been a lover of the museum since I can remember. I mean, when I met Bob and the stories Bob tells, it's nothing like a good storytelling. And this museum is bigger than anything that I can ever think about. We always talk about the tragedies in the Black culture, but in Buck's spirit, and what this museum brings is our successes. I mean, when you look at what the doors around the world that the Negro Leagues Museum opened up, it is bigger than baseball. It's because of their resiliency that they win. And we win every day. We get stuck. We get stuck on the negative. But look at who we are. Who built the White House? We did. So let's think about Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street wasn't Black Wall Street without our resiliency. We have presidents. We have directors. We have bank presidents. We have CEOs of some of the largest companies. And we have been through a lot. So tonight, I challenge you, especially if you're from the Black community, and I can tell you, I went to baseball games in 22nd and Brooklyn. My very first game, this was for the Royals. It was Kansas City A's. And I went to the Kansas City A's and I saw my first, what was the horse's name? Yeah. The first horse the Chiefs had with the girl, yeah, I saw that game too. Right there on 27. I'm challenging you to put your name on this museum. Donate to this museum. We support this museum as personally, not as the Heartland Black Chamber, personally, I am committed to donate $1,000 to the museum on behalf of my husband and myself. $10. Nobody's asking you to break the bank. I'm a pastor, I'm a good pastor. But I just want to say thank you to the Negro Leagues Museum. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Kathy, John, and everybody that works in the museum. You guys are preserving a history that we own. Nobody can come back and shut us down. If we do this, we own our history. And then go home and tell your family. Bring them to the museum. This is yours. Thank you.
Because we got two amazing performers who are going to set this little stage on fire. And when I tell you all that Tamara Williams is a road warrior, she is legitimately a road warrior because she and her manager drove from California to Kansas City to be here because they were afraid that they might get caught in the airline situation. And they spent almost 22 hours on the road because she wanted to be here to do this show in memory of the late, great Buck O'Neill. She is one of the best saxophonists industry. Her recent single called Strolling just reached the #1 spot on Media Base. So Kansas City, I need y'all to bring some energy and show some love for the amazing saxophonist, Miss Pamela Williams.